guys both get a dragon horde.
Come on, baby.
We both roll the thingy.
You know how that goes.
Oh, the
goblin.
That's, yeah, good. Fair. Fair to say.
Oh, yeah!
Oh my god!
It's 10 points.
Yes!
Greetings, friends, and welcome. We are the Board Game Barrister, Andy, Anthony, Ian, and Elizabeth, and we have just finished playing the game, A Midsummer Night'S Fair, a fantastic dice rolling game where we are competing in carnival attractions and using some fairy cards to mess with those very dice. Let's get into our review.
Welcome to A Midsummer Night'S Fair, where we all find ourselves in a fairy carnival and we're going to be trying to win some of the mini games they have. To get started, everybody's going to choose a color. We're going to grab a fairy token in that color for scoring, as well as a pool of 6 dice in our color. Everybody's going to roll their pool of dice to get started, so we'll do that now. And we're also going to do the same with the 9 fairy dice. Next thing we're going to do is deal 2 fairy mischief cards to each player at the table. They're going to keep those secret, but they can look at them. And we're always going to have 3 mini games available to play, so we're going to start the game out by flipping 3 mini games off the top of the deck. Right now I've got the Magic Geode game, Test Your Strength, and the Shooting Star Gallery. Now there's a few different elements to each of these mini games, the first of which is the magic number in the corner. As soon as each game is finished, we're going to look at anybody who has dice of that number on there, and they'll score a point for having it, so the magic number matters. Next we're going to look at its win condition. For Shooting Star Gallery, we're going to re-roll 3 of those fairy dice and put them on these 3 spots. When this mini game resolves, the player with the dice total that's closest to the total of those 3 dice will be our winner. And finally, each game has spots for 6 dice to be placed on it. So for our starting lineup here, we have 2 different cards that require some fairy dice. We're going to re-roll those and get those out on the table. Let's get into the actual gameplay, which is super simple. Each of your turns has 2 parts. Part 1 is going to be Fairy Mischief, which is going to involve the Mischief cards, and Part 2 is going to be to play a die. For your Mischief action, you can do one of 2 things. You can either play one of the Fairy Mischief cards in your hand, or you can draw a new one into your hand. To play a card, you'll just discard it and take the action on it. So for instance, re-roll any placed die would allow me to re-roll any die that was currently out on our minigame somewhere. And swap any 2 dice would let me swap any 2 dice of the same type, so 2 fairy dice for one another or 2 player dice for one another. Alternately, if I have fewer than 3 cards in my hand, I can just grab a new one off the top and add it to my hand. If you do have 3 cards, you have to spend this action playing a card so that you go down lower than 3. So we're just going to draw a card for our first turn here since there's not that much to mess with out on the board yet. Second is your dice action, and that just means placing a die somewhere into a minigame. I happen to have a 5, which is the magic number on the Shooting Star Gallery, so why don't we just place our 5 over here, and that would be the end of my turn. I drew a card and I placed a die, so we move on to the next player. And eventually, as we keep going around the table, those games are going to start to fill up. There's no way to remove dice from games, so it's inevitable that those minigames are going to fill, and that's what actually ends the games and determines a winner is as soon as the 6th and final die is placed. And each game has room for a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place winner. So where our goal in this one was to be closest to a total of 11, we have ended the game with a 10, which makes us the winner. Yellow has a 5, which makes them in 2nd place, and green is farthest from it, but they did participate, which puts them in 3rd. Now 3rd place gets you 1 point, as it says at the bottom of each card here. 2nd place gets you 3 points, that's not bad, and 1st place gets you a roll in the pit. The pit is inside of our game board here, and it's full of different prizes we can score, all of which are worth points. We're going to take the goblin die, which has 1 goblin face and the numbers 2 through 6 on the other faces, and we're going to roll that into the box. Now at the end of your roll, you're going to look at the number on the die. You score that many points. But also if your die is overlapping one of the prize squares at the bottom of the box, you'll score more points. So I score 4 plus 2 points. But there's a couple things that can go wrong with this roll. First is that if you roll that goblin face, you score no points either for the die or the prize you landed on. Instead, you're going to steal 1 mischief card from another player. And if that puts you up to 4 cards, then you discard 1 card from your hand. And the second is that if that die lands overlapping the dragon, then the dragon eats your prize die immediately and you score no points and nothing else for this roll. The last step in resolving a minigame is to remove all the dice from it and reset with a new game. This game is now discarded and we're going to move on to a new one from the top of the deck. And we've got the pie throw. Now we'll see 10 minigames during our time at the fair. There are 12 cards in the deck, but we're going to randomly remove 2 of them at the start of the game. And then once we've depleted our draw pile of minigames, we're going to continue to play and resolve minigames until there's only 1 left on the table that hasn't been resolved. That triggers the end of the game, so the last game won't get finished. Meaning we'll have ended up resolving a total of 9 minigames. That triggers the end of our game, but it's not the end of the action. Because before we finish our time at the fair, everybody gets 1 more chance to roll into the pit, and this time you get to roll using one of your player dice rather than the goblin die, so no chances at goblin mischief this time. After that last round of prizes, we're going to see who got farthest along on our scoring track, and they're our winner.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of dice games. It's kind of my thing, if you guys know anything about our channel. So this one is not a push your luck game, which is typically my favorite kind of dice game. This one is a roll your dice and then use the randomized results to your best effect. The mischief cards allowing you to swap and change things about those dice rolls, I thought was really intuitive and really neat that you had to play, a mischief card or get a new mischief card in your hand every round. Really felt pretty interesting to be able to maximize the use of your resources that were randomized, your dice pool, and then using something that you can control by poking at other people and changing their dice or changing your dice to be advantageous to yourself to win the games.
Yeah, the fact that you have to play them, there were points in the game where we looked at the cards and went, I don't want to do anything, but I can't draw a card because I have 3. I have to do something.
Yep.
All right, well, fine. I guess I'll do this over here. It's funny. So the fact that it forces you to interact, I think, is actually really good, because then nobody just sits there and is like, well, I guess I'll just draw a card.
Yep.
Well, I guess I'll just draw a card.
Yep.
Yeah, it was cool to see our interactions with the game mechanics unfold and become more interesting over the course of the game. Early on, you're looking at the cards and the abilities and where you can put dice, and you're going, I'm just going to try to work on these games, and if I change something, maybe it'll be like changing my own dice to be better for me. And then maybe 2 or 3 mini games in, we started to be like, now I see the opportunities to change other people's dice and start to mess with them a little in ways that are advantageous to me. And then 2 or 3 mini games later, we were like, the fairy dice are really interesting. You can totally mess with an entire mini game at its core by switching out fairy dice or changing the values on those. So I like how they put a bunch of really simple mechanics into this box, and then they unfold into some really interesting interactions.
Well, and the interaction's not always negative. Multiple times during the game, we created allegiances with one another where we would help each other out. So even if you're not a fan of that, oh, let me mess with your plan and screw you over, you can use your mischief cards to create positive mischief.
It'll be funny. I'm gonna do what Ian did.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Oh,
Just let's be cool about this.
that's fair.
We can both get a dragon's hoard. And the game says it's for ages 8 and up, and I see there's no mechanics that an 8-year-old could not interact with and understand, but to really embrace the parts of the game that make it so kind of polished an experience as what it is, I think would really hit its stride starting at like ages 10 or 11 and up and beyond from there.
I would say this is a game about, learning about how you can manipulate things in an explosive way. Maybe for the younger players, they don't see that right away, and they are looking at, a typical board game where you try to accomplish the goal. But then when you realize that you can just obliterate what the rules for this card are simply by swapping one die for another, it's like this, mega control. So it's a really great way to introduce that, concept of control in board games that you don't see for like little kids games, and introduce them to more gamey mechanics in a pretty safe and inviting, outrageous, silly way. I'm gonna re-roll a place die.
Whoa, what? It's an even.
The one thing you
Slow
need
down,
right now is
Louisa.
enemies,
I'm gonna put it on down there.
Yeah, it's worth noting that this game is kind of makes itself out to be and totally fulfills itself as a game where you can't count on anything. It's a game where you putting effort into a game may end up in somebody else messing up the effort you've put into it and stealing a victory away from you, and it's a game where having a victory on a minigame may not get you anything, whereas the people in second place get 3 points automatically. You being the winner means you get a pit roll, and that is the most swingy part of the entire game. You could score anywhere from 1 to 12 points or nothing. So by the end, I think all of us had kind of embraced the idea that, like, the points don't matter. Mm-hmm. Like, it's all about the cool moves we're making and the little interactions we're having.
Well, and the best part about the Goblin Die is that feels like a carnival game. Like, the idea of, like, yeah, I won this thing. What's my prize? You get to roll this dice. Good luck.
Yeah.
And then you get, the feeling of that, I got a thing, right? So, like, I think it's the positive and negative of that roller coaster felt very carnival game to me, and it really lived up to the theme.
You're right, the carnival game theming is so good. Something like Splat the Rat, where it's like match this one number and that number could change any time with somebody else doing something random. Or try to match this die and you don't know what the die is going to be until the end of the game. All of those were like, I hate that game. Like, I'm not playing Splatterette. There's no way. That game sucks. It's too chancy. But that feels like a carnival where like everybody's avoiding that one game until the one person walks up and is like, I want a giant teddy bear. I won the dragon's sword. Whatever else.
I can just hear the sound of rings bouncing off milk bottles.
Yeah, that one's great.
The way that the cards are set up is not like you can go there as a solo experience by yourself and have no interaction with the rest of the players. Unless 2 or more players are contributing to a card, it kind of feels like it just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it pushes that we are all in this at a carnival together playing these games feeling of it.
All right, I think that does it for A Midsummer Night's Fair. Thanks so much for joining us. We had a fantastic time with this one. We hope you had fun watching. As always, hit that like button, leave a comment if you got one. We love reading those. Subscribe to see our new videos every week when we post those, and check out our online store. We got A Midsummer Night's Fair in there and a bunch of other cool stuff. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.